Now back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
And welcome back to The Law Show on CL 650. We're talking about immigration and citizenship. Alex Stojkovic and Rudy Kisher are here with us today from MKS Law in downtown Vancouver. And I teased it before the break. French Mobility. It's not a new cell phone company. What is French Mobility?
Okay, so Mobilité francophone, or the French Mobility Program.
Much raw for a while.
The French Mobility Program is a program that existed in some form prior to 2013, that has been revived and somewhat expanded by the current government. In June they announced this program in the spring of 2016, and then in the summer they opened it up. And essentially what it is if you are an employer, if you want to hire a foreign national, you need a labor market impact assessment. Well, you're exempt from that requirement if you are recruiting a francophone person, and you have some connection in the job, and it doesn't have to be particularly strong one, right, to have a francophone speaker in that position. So if you are hiring someone from a French-speaking country who's a native speaker of French, and they just have to be francophone.
What's the test for that?
So it has to be their mother tongue.
Has to be their mother tongue.
That's the way it's written. So
that's the way it's written. So a lot of people from France, for example, or from West Africa, from countries that are francophone,
former French colonies, right?
Former French colonies, Belgium, Switzerland. Those are all countries that where there's significant francophone numbers. As long as they're moving to a part of Canada that isn't Quebec, because this program does not apply to Quebec, and the policy they can get a work permit long term to work for this employer, and the employer does not have to go through their normal labor market impact assessment or certification process. So it's very, very facilitative for people looking to hire somebody who is
francophone. But that could be viewed
speaking.
as discriminatory against people who don't speak French.
It's favoritism without question, but the policy decision behind it is that Canada is committed. One of the goals of the federal government is to promote and enhance the francophone fabric of the rest of Canada. That there are francophone communities pretty much everywhere in Canada, and where they exist, they need to be promoted. And as a result, if some people are coming who will enhance those communities, they'll be rewarded with more facilitative. Their employers will be rewarded, and they will be rewarded with easier rules around becoming to getting work permits, and then later to permanent residence.
Correct me if I'm wrong. When the guidelines came out, when it initially released, it seemed a lot more restrictive in the sense that the job actually had to involve had to need French, and on top of that, there had to be a francophone community there. From what I see of the list of requirements, that seem to be decreased, and you really don't need.
Let me guess. The phone call goes like this: ring, ring, ring. Hello, Rudy, MKS. I want to come to Canada. Do you speak French?
I think
is that question number one?
That is number one. If I have an employer that calls me, and they're usually we're getting a call from an employer that's saying, I want to hire this guy. My first question now is always, does he speak French? Because it's something that you could.
If he does,
overlook.
We have an advantage now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a great program.
So this French Mobility Program, a percentage of people coming into the country, what would you say it's at under this program?
Oh, I don't know. I can't imagine. I mean, overall, Francophone numbers are significant for immigration because Quebec runs its own program. So as a result...
But we've heard a lot about that they run a program that benefits BC because they go through Quebec and end up living in British Columbia.
But that's for investors. So the rest of the program, though, is very much geared towards younger people that are Francophone. Mm-hmm. And most years, their numbers are in the 30 to 40,000 range.
Does that add up to the 300,000?
That's included in the national 300, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, every year we get about 150,000 people coming to Canada on work permits. So I'd be shocked if you're going to see 1,000 people under this program. I don't think it'll be that
So you
large.
say it's insignificant?
It's a small number. For sure.
It won't be a big number, but it is a new opportunity that people have that didn't before. So, I mean, I know employers who would prefer to recruit in this way rather than do a labor market impact assessment in certain industries where it makes sense. Like, for example, if you're running fine dining restaurant, or if you're involved in the wine industry. I mean, there may be significant advantages to you to avoid the labor market impact assessment process if you can just hire somebody directly.
And from the other end, if you are, somebody who speaks French, then, you should be looking for employers that might be able to hire you in that,
Yeah, you have a big advantage in finding work.
Yeah.
So does the employer need to have a reason to access your French skills? So if
Theoretically, yes.
Oh, they have to show that they need somebody who speaks French.
Yeah.
Or not just, or just that they happen to speak French.
Well, but that doesn't have to. The justification for that can be they're selling. They have French clients. They have francophone speaking customers.
But I'm saying if they have none of that, would they still get this advantage?
On the way the program is written, it would seem to me that they would not have that advantage.
Yeah. Okay, so there needs to be a reason for them to have a French speaking person. Okay, I thought it was just. Oh, by the way, I speak French, you get to jump the queue.
But,
right?
that being said, there are lots of opportunities for that. I mean,
sure, yeah, absolutely.
A lot of our industries in Vancouver aren't just selling in Canada. They're selling abroad.
Or they're selling into Quebec.
They're selling into Quebec. So how hard is it to really justify at least having one francophone on staff?
I heard a stat a couple of years ago that there was 400,000 kids either in French immersion or French school in British Columbia. I thought that was a quite high number, but
that doesn't seem possible.
6% of all the students are
400,000, a population of 4 million. That doesn't sound.
Yeah, I didn't think that sounded right.
Maybe 40,000.
4.75 people, but yeah.
So maybe 40,000 might be that doesn't sound right.
So I have a question for you. We've talked about the French mobility system, but just generally, in your opinion about where we are in Vancouver in the next 20 years, is this just going to continue to be a destination that people want to come to? Is it somewhere that people want to live? Are we going to get to a saturation point where there's too many people here, or it's too expensive? Are you hearing any blowback on that?
No,
or is it still a destination?
I think it's, I 100% think it's a destination now for people that can make a lot of choices. So I in my practice, I see people that are high net worth individuals that I'm shocked that they're picking Vancouver. They're coming from places like Switzerland. They're coming from places like Brazil. They have a great quality of life anywhere. And you ask them, why are you coming to Vancouver? And, you hear a lot of different things. Number one, the climate is mild. Number two, if they're coming from places like Brazil, security is top notch. And if they're coming from places like China or India, the environment sort of is the number one issue.
Air quality.
And I don't think our air quality, I don't think those things are going to change quickly. The prices may go up. And they have, I used to see a lot more Brits moving here. That has definitely gone down as the pound has suffered and as our real estate has gone up. But I don't see that changing anytime soon if you take a look at it as a global destination.
Yeah, I can't see that either. You look at the factors driving the economy in Vancouver. Really, we have several parallel sorts of Vancouvers. There's a Vancouver which, in terms of industrial Vancouver, that has grown at a steady, relatively slow, but steady clip over the last 20, 30 years that's dominated by niche industries. Most of those niche industries at the moment are doing very well, be it visual effects, video gaming, manufacturing in the food processing, particularly in organics. All of those niche industries that Vancouver does well, Vancouver is doing well at the moment. Mm-hmm. In terms of our primary resource industries and sort of construction and all of those that are drivers of other elements in the Vancouver economy, those are arguably doing even better. I mean, the service economy in Vancouver is really overdeveloped. It's probably on par in some ways with San Francisco and Los Angeles, when our industrial base is probably closer to Pittsburgh or Cleveland. Where else other than Vancouver can you get, the latest yoga instructor that's doing, that's the craze in anywhere from Rio to Shanghai to New York? We have all of that
here. But that's the argument that we're going to have all of these wealthy foreigners moving here, and it's going to be
Monte Carlo.
It's going to be a luxury destination, and the regular folks are just going to be walking dogs and serving coffee and doing yoga instruction.
Yeah, but on the other hand, what are you making walking dogs compared to 20 years ago?
I mean, when a house costs $1.4 million, that's a lot of walking.
Sure, no, I understand, but I'm not. The question you asked is anything going to change?
Yeah.
And the reality is what's driving people here is stability, rule of law.
And as the rest of the world becomes crazier, we're seeing all of this, terrorism and what's happened recently with the election in the U.S. You think it's just another reason why Vancouver's
I don't think that terrorism. To me, I don't see that as like people aren't moving for that. The security reasons. When I talk to people that live in Brazil, the guy sells security cameras. Next thing, his place is being broken into, and he's actually, the victim of, getting ripped off, or their kids are getting kidnapped, and they are, having to put microchips in their kids.
So that's personal security versus overall terrorist.
Yeah, but the environment.
The environment.
The environment's huge.
Said.
I mean, that was the shocker to me when I started practice. I had this great sort of liberal idea that, it was all about democracy and people were coming here for, the freedom of expression and, freedom of conscience and that they were coming for these great liberal values that we have here in the country. And the reality is, I'd ask them, so why are you coming to Canada? And the answer was the fresh air.
What's interesting, having been in China a few times, and I explain to people who have never been, I say, you can have as much money as you want. You can't buy fresh air.
Yeah.
And you can be the richest guy in China, but if you want your kids to grow up where the water is clean and the air is fresh, it isn't China. Yeah. It's somewhere else, right? So that's another reason.
And those factors aren't going to change.
No.
They're not going to change. And as a result, it is hard to envision a Vancouver where the population isn't going to keep growing for the next 20 years. Now, are they going to be people who are coming to work in Vancouver, or are they going to be people that are coming to live in Vancouver?
It's a retirement
That's the policy question, right? And if we want to attract industry, if we want to say, hey, and when I say there's different Vancouvers, this Vancouver has grown. I mean, take a look. 10 years ago, we didn't have Amazon in town, Sony or Disney. We didn't have Microsoft with 400 employees or 500 employees in the city. Those are high-skilled jobs that are well-paying. Now, if we don't, policy choices we make in the Lower Mainland are going to impact on whether or not we become too expensive for those industries to stay here. Mm-hmm. So,
because we hear that. I mean, was the CEO of Hootsuite said, enough already. We can't get good people here because it's so expensive.
Yeah, but right. I mean, it's important to remember when you're taking a look at immigration, people are able to buy in our real estate market without actually having no status here. Right? There's no request, and I think that's missed sometimes. Yeah.
That's slowly changing, and you're seeing with the mortgage changes and the mortgage rules that's changing as well. But overall, though, there is a positive element to the real estate demand side, and it tells you that people do want to live and own a piece of this place, and that almost guarantees that you're still going to have continued population growth. It's almost impossible to imagine Vancouver, Metro Vancouver, as not being a spur of growth for the province generally. Really, I think the challenge from an immigration perspective is to get working immigrants into the other parts of the province and to spur growth there in your Kelownas, your Victorias, your Nanaimos.
Well, especially with the LNG being...
With Site C.
Site C. I mean, you're going to need guys that are... welders and steel workers.
The problem is that those, those immigrants will come to do that job, but they're not coming to stay there, right? Which is the reality. You can't tie a person to northern BC. Yeah. The project takes 6 years to complete, and then they might stay. I mean, there's a chance they'll be, but the job's going to be gone, right? Once the project's
unless
completed.
You create incentives for them to stay, right? I mean, and that's the challenge. Are we able to do that?
When we come back, we're going to talk about the refugee situation. It was a year ago now when the Liberals came into power and brought in all the refugees, 25,000. Where are we with that, or more coming, what have you? We'll pick that up next when we're talking about immigration and citizenship. Alex Stojkovic and Rudy Kishler are here from MKS Law. We'll talk about it next on The Law Show.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.